Hey, Branson, how are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thanks. Can you see me okay? I'm trying something a little different here.
Yes, sir. I see you in two horses.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's my screensaver, whatever you call it. Okay, well, we'll give this a try. I'm using my iPad for the first time, so God help us.
Well, I've been getting paid to stream people's podcasts, so I use Zoom, and with
Cool.
my audio mixing board, able to bring in the voices and mix them down and send them back out. And
Wow,
I've been doing that for the last like week, working with a company out of Raleigh.
that's cool. Do you use OBS for your streaming?
Yes, I use OBS.
Okay, sometime I want to talk to you about that because I'd like to understand that
Okay.
because I think it would be, we stream to we stream to YouTube. But I think it would be kind of cool to be able to stream like to our website and to other places as well. So I'd like to understand OBS. Everyone talks about it, but I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, that's basically what you can do. You can come out of it, but you might want something more like Restream than OBS.
Okay.
And Restream allows you to come out of wherever you're going and it hits Restream and it goes like Facebook, Instagram, everywhere at one time.
Yeah, that's what I would like.
I'll get you some information on Restream.
Okay, cool. Grant says he's having trouble getting into the meeting. I'm not sure why. Oh, let's see. Oh, there he is. Okay. Hey, Grant. Did you figure it out? Are you there, Grant?
Hey Dennis, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. For some reason, I couldn't get on my laptop.
Huh.
So sorry about
Wonder
that.
why.
Yeah, that's never happened before. So I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah, really weird. I'm like signed in on my account, so I don't know. I'm gonna keep working on it. That way, I can have an easier time
Yeah.
letting people in and stuff.
I'm
But
I'm using I'm doing this on my iPad, so maybe that's causing some kind of complication. First time I've
yeah,
ever used the iPad. I don't know.
no big. Who knows? Maybe technology's just out for me today.
Yeah. Hey Ruth, how are you? Oh, she hadn't joined yet. Okay. Greg, keep an eye on the admissions because it's not coming up real clear.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on mine either.
Do you have a participant screen?
Uh, yes, I'm not sure. Am I co-host already?
I'm trying to make you that. Here you go.
Okay.
You are now.
I am now. All right, sweet. So hopefully that'll allow me to see it better.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could do all the same stuff. It looks like it has all the same controls as my laptop. So we'll see. I think I can make Tessa the co-host when she comes on.
Awesome.
Um, so while we're waiting for her, I might as well tell you guys a little bit about her. Um, she is originally, or I don't know if she's originally, but she went to UNC Wilmington. I think she graduated from there, and she started a small business making, as I understand, dog collars, like personalized dog collars. And I think she started off maybe on Etsy. I'm not even 100% sure, but it actually got to the point where um, it's a retail store that does pretty well. It's in Bozeman, Montana. She was featured in an article. Um, I have a brother-in-law who lives in Montana, so I'm always getting stuff from Montana. So her story was featured, and I reached out to her to speak to our class because she did so well with that she started helping other small businesses. Uh, oh, here she is. I'll let her talk about. But she started helping other small businesses, um, not only with their business but also with Shopify. Hey, Tessa, how are you?
Hi.
Okay, I'm talking about you. And so anyway, she's here now, so I can stop talking about her. We can say good stuff now that she's here. Tessa's really cool. I really like her. I don't know. No, just kidding. So anyway, I think we're right about our start time, and thank you, Tessa, for coming all the way halfway across the country from Smoky, Montana, where my brother-in-law lives near Butte. So I'm constantly kept abreast of what's going on in Montana by him. He lives in Whitehall, actually, which is east of Butte. So anyway, Tessa is graciously agreed to share her experiences as an entrepreneur. She did go to UNC Wilmington, so that is her saving grace. No, just kidding. But that was one of the reasons I reached out to her, because I figured she wouldn't think it was so weird that someone from North Carolina was reaching out to her. But I'm going to turn it over to her. I'm even going to make you the co-host if I can figure out how to do that. Let's see here. Okay. And I know you don't have a PowerPoint, but just in case you want to, you can do stuff.
Okay. Great.
So,
Awesome.
Okay. So let me introduce everybody to Tessa Whitmer, and Tessa, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for having me. And thank you to all of you for being here. I hope that you find some value in our conversation today. As Dennis mentioned, I don't have a formal PowerPoint prepared. I hope that's okay.
Yay! Yay! We're elated.
Great. Awesome. Because I thought probably the most valuable thing for you guys today would be, I can just share with you a little bit about my history with starting a business and running a business, and then eventually landing on Shopify as an e-commerce platform. And then I would love to open it up for questions. It's great that this is a smaller group, and so hopefully we'll have time to get to all of your individual questions if you have any. And I'll be an open book. So if at any point during my kind of storybook lesson, you have any questions or want me to clarify anything, then just hop on, unmute yourself and interrupt me, or jump into the chat, and I'm happy to answer questions that way. If it's more of a private question, then feel free to message me privately in the chat, and I'll answer you one-on-one there. So, as Dennis mentioned, my name's Tessa Whitmer. I live in Bozeman, Montana, which is only about 45 minutes away from Dennis's brother in Whitehall. Whitehall is a little bit more like Montana than Bozeman is. Bozeman's a little.
I'd say so.
Yeah, they call it Los Angeles. I don't think it's far off.
Yeah.
I did go to UNC Wilmington. I have a bachelor's degree in Spanish, which is the bachelor's degree you get whenever you're not quite sure what you want to do, but you happen to have some Spanish credits from high school that make it pretty quick and easy to finish your bachelor's degree, then figure out later what you want to do. After that, I moved to Missouri and got my master's degree in technical communication. And it was during the time that I was in grad school. I was working as a high school Spanish teacher. And that's whenever I started what ended up being the business that I now own, which is called Hattie Rex. So I was a high school Spanish teacher. You've probably heard public school teachers don't make a ton of money. And so I was always kind of looking for a side hustle or something that could help me get ahead a little bit and have a little bit of extra spending money in my pocket. I got a puppy. His name was Pablo. He was a little yellow lab, and I was a pretty doting new dog mom and really just wanted the best for my new fur child. And one of the things you need when you have a dog is a tag that has the name and number on it. But I wasn't very excited about any of the options that were available on the market, with the blue aluminum fire hydrant. I wasn't into it. So I set out to make my own dog tag. I bought a set of metal stamps on eBay. I bought some tin snips and some thin copper sheet from a hardware store. Lowe's is what we have in the town. I used a hammer from the shed, and I hammered out his name and my phone number on a cinder block. And it was really bad, of course. I'm like really thin and I had no idea what I was doing. But I enjoyed the process, making things with my hands and being able to make things for my dog. And so I started making more and more and more of them, and slowly started learning about better tools and better resources and better methods so that I could make a better product. I started just kind of giving them to different people in my family and friends, and everybody I knew had a mediocre but hand-stamped metal dog tag. And then one day I was reading a magazine, and this was 2007. So I was reading a magazine and there was a little snippet about Etsy.com. I had never heard of it before. It was 2007. And as indicative of the times, I put down the magazine and went into the next room and booted up my Dell Tower computer so that I could visit Etsy.com and see what it was all about. And it turned out that this was a way that I could start selling these dog tags online. And so I signed up the same day. At the time, I was the only person selling dog tags on Etsy. Now, if you look on Etsy, I think there are like 80,000 or 800,000 or just some enormous number of dog tags that you can find.
That's incredible. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I feel like I should have like a badge on my profile, like first.
Yeah.
But
I vote
instead,
for
I just
that.
have more reviews, and that's fine too. So
You're also the first dog tag maker that's been on our class. So, you keep making first.
I find whenever you find like a really particular niche, it's really easy to stand out.
Okay.
So I started selling on Etsy, and it was terrible. I didn't know how to take photos. I didn't know how to write listings. I didn't know how to price my products. I barely knew how to make dog tags. But for some reason, people bought them. And the process of selling them gave me even more and more motivation to do a better job. And like I said, I was a high school teacher. And so for me, making an extra $20 a day was a really big deal. And I thought, hey, maybe I could make $30 a day. And, of course, in the back of my mind, it was maybe one day I could quit my teaching job and be a full-time dog tag maker.
Now that's ambition. I love it. That's ambition.
So I kind of kept going, and I was definitely hustling. Like I was going, working all the time as teachers do, and then I would get home from teaching kids all day and sit down and make dog tags and take pictures of them and come up with new designs. And I can't say I had a ton of social life at that time, but in retrospect, I don't really regret it. So then one day I got an invitation to visit a maker's market in Houston, Texas. And I was in Missouri, so this was a 12-hour drive. It wasn't just next door. And it felt like she was inviting me to something kind of out of my league. It was a designer feature, and I didn't feel like I was a designer. But she paid my booth fee and said, if you can make it to Houston, then we'll have you there. And it was a pretty high-end clothing store that put this on. And she suggested that I bring my products, that I make things there on the spot, and that I also bring some chains so that people could wear my dog tags as human jewelry.
Oh.
And I thought she was absolutely insane. I was like, she has no idea. These are for dogs. These are not for people. No one is going to want these things. But for some reason, I picked up some chains and went to Houston, and she was right. Instead of having a dog's name and phone number on it, people were wanting their children's name and their children's birth dates, or their monogram and their anniversary date, or some special mantra or other words on there. And suddenly I ended up making jewelry for people. I never could have seen that coming, but I'm glad that I kind of followed that whim. And while I was there in Houston, somebody told me that I really needed my own website, because I told her that I was selling on Etsy, and she said, that's great, but if you really want to make a go at this, then you need your own website. And that started my journey of trying to find a good website, of learning that when it comes to websites at that point in time, this would have been 2009, that you get what you pay for. And a lot of the really amazing website platforms that exist now, that I'll talk about here in a little bit, they didn't exist then. So if you wanted something that was custom, then you had to pay for it. And the people who were out there who would do it for a price that I could afford wouldn't tell me that they weren't going to do a good job. I just learned that kind of the hard way. So I had a number of different website platforms over the years. Wordpress, platforms that don't exist anymore. And it was constantly a struggle, because part of the thing with the personalized products that I was making is the website needed to be able to accommodate these personalizations. So I allowed customers to choose the size, the metal, the font, and then also input the text that they wanted on the product. And in 2009, 2010, these were some pretty tall orders for websites to be able to accommodate that. And even on Etsy, you would have to put the description or put the instructions in the description of the product and say, leave these pieces of information in the notes to seller at checkout. And you know, that ends up with a lot of customer confusion, which results in a lot more work for me going back and forth, trying to, you know, get this information from the customer, and the customer's not quite sure if they're going to get what they want, because, you know, it's Etsy and it's kind of a new thing, and who is this and what's going on. So I learned a lot through that process about how much of a pain a bad website can be. And I think I was right in assuming that a one-size-fits-all website wouldn't work for me at that time. But what I wasn't aware of is that these platforms that exist now were popping up. And I didn't have anyone in my orbit at the time to say, hey, have you heard about this new resource that you could be using? This might work for you. I was living in a small town in Missouri. I did not have a group like you guys are in, a business accelerator, or right now living in Montana, I'm lucky to be in a community that has some nonprofit business organizations where you can network, where you can kind of have that community to share ideas and tips with. In the town that I was living in Missouri, the only person I knew who owned their own business was my dad's accountant, and everybody else worked for someone else. It just wasn't really I don't think it was the time of people being freelance and using the power of the internet or the gig economy or things like that to make their own businesses. And it was also just living in a small rural town where that wasn't necessarily part of the culture and part of the dream growing up. So I feel like I maybe was a little bit late to the game, realizing what was out there. And in the meantime, you know, I wasn't focusing on building websites. I was focusing on building a business. At the end of 2010, I moved from Missouri to Montana, and started just working, you know, still working out of a spare bedroom in my house. And in my house in Missouri, I had a basement studio with a separate entrance. So I had a gal who would come in and help me with shipping and things like that. And then in my house in Montana, I didn't have that. And so she was just coming like into my living room and, you know, into the spare bedroom. And it got a little uncomfortable. And I wanted a space outside of my house. So I rented a studio. And then after a while, I found another studio that happened to have some street level retail opportunity. And so I ended up moving my studio and opening up a very small retail store. And when I say very small, I mean like 90 square feet was the retail area.
Wow.
With the studio behind it. Yeah, it was, if the building was 300 square feet, it was originally a 1-car garage that they converted into a store. So being that small, the rent was affordable, and so I tried it out, and it turned out that the retail section it passed over my online sales in terms of my revenue. So whenever I started it, it was, I just need a space where I can work on my stuff without being in my house. And if I can have somebody come in and it can help me pay the rent, then that's great. And I was really surprised at how much customer traffic I got. And it was definitely the type of business that customer referrals went a long way. Because I didn't have an advertising budget. I wasn't on the main strip. So my customers were people who had heard about me from somewhere else. Some of them were people who had shopped with me on Etsy and then read enough to see that I had a space in Bozeman. So then my focus kind of shifted. I was still selling online. I still had my wholesale accounts that I had picked up over the years, selling dog tags and jewelry. But I started selling retail. And after about a year in the tiny little space, I moved to a larger space where I've been in now for 7 years. And eventually I started needing more of a platform where I could keep track of these sales. So for a while, as the business grew, I was just kind of scrambling to keep track of everything. I had my website orders, my wholesale orders were coming in via email, and I would keep track of them in a Google Doc. And then once I shipped them, I would erase them out of the Google Doc. It was a nightmare trying to train people because nothing was really organized. All of that information lived in my head. And it's tough on an employee and on an employer whenever you're kind of the only one who can do things. And I didn't set it up that way on purpose, out of ego or something like that. I set that up because I wasn't I didn't have the foresight, I guess, to realize that the business was going to grow and that I would need somebody to be able to help me. And then you get to the point where you're so busy that you don't have time to step back and say, okay, wait, I need a better system, because you're just trying to deal with the orders that came in that day and deal with the deadlines that need to be dealt with that day. So whenever I moved into my new location and I had a bigger space and bigger inventory, and I wanted to start offering the work of other local artists on a consignment basis, I knew that I was going to have to do something. And at that point, I had an employee who was very patient in learning all of the things that previously just lived in my head. Then they started living in her head. And then she started saying, well, what if we did it like this? And she helped me a lot. So through that process, I realized I need a point of sale system, and I also need a better website. And so for probably 4 months or so, I was working on building a WordPress website with a developer, simultaneously setting up a Shopify point of sale system for my store. And I was doing this because WordPress is a lot more customizable for a website than Shopify is. And that's just kind of an inherent feature of WordPress. But WordPress is also pretty confusing, and I don't recommend WordPress really to anybody unless they do know how to write code and are willing to spend a lot of time doing this. But I didn't know that at the time. And as I was setting up my Shopify, I found something about their website. And at first I thought, well, there's no way that, that this is going to work for my business because I have, all of these special needs. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized, oh, I think that this could be both things for me. And I really wanted to be wrong in that assumption, because I had just spent 4 months and a lot of money building this other website, and to have to throw all of that away because I found a better solution. It was like, I kind of hope I'm wrong, but I kind of hope I'm not. And it turns out that Shopify was able to accommodate all of the things I needed, both in my point of sale system and on my website. So I paid my WordPress person and cut her loose and went all in on Shopify. And being someone who was paying somebody to build a WordPress website before, I found myself able to do all of the Shopify stuff myself. I'm pretty comfortable with technology, but I'm not a coder or a developer or anything like that. They just had a really nice interface, a lot of good support, and a lot of apps that allowed you to customize it to be really whatever you wanted it to be. The first thing that I remember, other than the fact that I had everything in one place, was that my reporting was now so much easier. Previously, if I had wanted to know how did this year compare to last year, this month compared to the same month last year, it probably would have taken me hours, maybe weeks to go through and figure out all of that data and where does the data live. And now I could just go in and find it in Shopify very easily. I could compare in-store sales versus website sales. I could compare my products versus the products of other vendors, and which products are selling best, which colors are selling best, which times of day are producing the most sales. The amount of data that I had at my fingertips was incredible. Another thing that I really enjoyed about it was the ability to sync the inventory. So if I sold something online, I could just grab it off of the floor, so that way somebody didn't come in and buy it there. And previously, whenever you're syncing your inventory from your in-store sales to your website, you have to go through and calculate how many did I sell today? Okay, now I need to go to my website and remove these so that I don't oversell these tonight. And Shopify keeps track of your inventory across all of your different sales channels. So it ended up being something that I really loved and that I was really, really excited about. I was able to start moving my wholesale orders and having my wholesale accounts place their orders through Shopify, rather than them coming in via email and me inputting them manually. So it saved me a ton of time there. It really was a game changer. It made hiring and training employees significantly easier. Whenever I added in those consignment vendors, Shopify allowed me to very easily, like within 20 minutes or so every month, just go in and calculate how much I owe everyone, just based on seeing how much I sold of their products and then calculating it based on their commission rate and sending their payment out right away. Later on, and this is more recently, I added the ability for me to drop ship from other artists. So during COVID, whenever my store was closed, I considered closing it. Everything was so up in the air. I didn't know if retail as we know it was completely dead. And I didn't want to throw a bunch of money renting a retail space if no one was ever going to shop retail again. So during those months, I added on to my Shopify site to allow the capability of connecting with other people's Etsy stores or Shopify sites or Wix or whatever platform that they may be on, and syncing their inventory with my site. So if I make a sale of one of their products, it goes into their order list and they can fulfill it, and it goes to my customer. I get a commission, and my customers can still shop kind of like they're at like a really curated Etsy or a maker's market, all from the website. And without Shopify, that would have been a really tedious, cumbersome technical task. And not to say that it didn't require a little bit of work, but it was possible without knowing code or without being, having a team of developers that worked on that. So from there, I ended up with more time on my hands, really, because all of my reporting, all of my inventory, all of my bookkeeping, everything was just so tidy that I ended up with a little bit more time on my hands. And one day I had an art gallery who's in the neighborhood downtown come in and ask me, like, how are you keeping track of your inventory? You sell online, you sell in the store, what are you doing? And I told her about Shopify. And she shared with me that that she was spending about 20 hours every month doing her consignment payouts and doing her inventory reconciliation. And she had big binders, and she wasn't able to spend time with her family because she had 20 hours of bookkeeping and manual handwritten type of work every single month. And she eventually became my first client. And I at the time wasn't working on starting a consultancy or anything like that. It was just, one of my fellow business owners was drowning in paperwork, and I knew that there was an easier way. So I helped her get set up. And through that process, I realized I enjoy this, like cleaning up people's messes, making it so that they can have the same sort of tidy and efficient operations for their business as I was able to come up with mine. So I eventually started my small business consultancy, which is called Lightbox. And now I still have Hattie Rex. And I also work as a consultant through Lightbox, helping people with their Shopify sites. And with that, I do a variety of things. So one, I help people build their Shopify sites from the ground up. I also help people migrate their sites from Squarespace or wherever it lives before and move it over to Shopify. And for my clients who are already on Shopify, sometimes they just need some tweaks or some advice, and I jump in there and help. And then for other people, they have me come in and make recommendations, and then they have people on their team that jump in and then do the more technical work. So I work in a lot of different capacities there, and just aim to be a resource for small businesses who want to use the Shopify platform to grow and to manage their businesses. And I think that kind of brings me to the end of my little about me story. So that's kind of my journey from being a dog tag maker and now into small business owner, no longer a high school teacher, and being a Shopify consultant. So I'd love to answer any questions that you have, whether it's about my experience, about Shopify. If you want to know if Shopify could work for you, other platforms that you might be considering. I'm an open book, so feel free to jump in.
Well, before people start asking questions, I just have to say, this is so entertaining because for me, as someone who's supposed to teach this stuff, one of the big things that I always talk about is product market fit, right? What is the product? What is it that you're trying to sell? And what's interesting about your experience is the market came to you and said, hey, make this, right? Make my dog tag, make my jewelry, get me my back end. So it's really kind of cool. It's one of the few people I've run across where everything kind of happened the way it should, but not for the same kind of reasons, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. And I call myself an accidental business owner because, people talk about like your cash flow analysis and your business plan. And I didn't have any of that. Retroactively, I have taken classes and I have learned these things. And it's definitely helped me take my business to the next level, having a plan, knowing how to use debt responsibly, how to plan for these things. But I didn't know that in the beginning. I was just a 22-year-old kid who wanted to make a cute dog tag and make a couple extra bucks, and kind of followed the breadcrumbs and didn't give up.
Oh, that I just love that. Well, I'm going to open it up to questions for those of you. We have folks here who use Shopify, some who want to use Shopify, some who hate Shopify. But let's start with Branson. He's usually good for some observations. Branson?
I've just switched over with joining the class last semester of understanding Shopify. I've built about 5 or 6 websites with WordPress, and I'm very familiar, and I built other people's sites, but just for some reason I can get people to go to my WordPress easier than I can to the Shopify. And I'm trying to push everything through Shopify, but it seems like my outward websites still get more traffic.
So are you using a WordPress site as well as a Shopify store for the same business?
No. I'm using, at first I was using my main site selling my music and clothing off of that, but then I separated and trying to sell the clothing on Shopify and keeping the music on my main site.
Okay, I see. So one of the things, and if you've built WordPress sites, then you know all about this stuff, is the SEO. So the longer that your site has existed, the more traffic it has, the more content that it has, the more that Google knows, oh, this is a site that people like and that people are going to. So you're showing up higher in search results. So that's probably one of the reasons why, is that it has more of a history. It's more reputable and more well known. Are you still selling things on your WordPress site, or do you have it kind of linked over so that for apparel, go here?
Yes, what I did was I basically took everything down off of my music site, even the music, and I started trying to push everything with clothing first back to Shopify. Now I'm starting to put the music back up on the site, but all the music that I'm putting up, I'm giving out free, just to try to use that to hook them in with a link to go to the Shopify page.
Gotcha. So what you're trying to do is to get people to go more to the Shopify site. Am I following you?
Well, they're
Yes.
going to WordPress, and then he's trying to push them to Shopify because they're going to WordPress for music, and then for clothing, he's pushing them to Shopify.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly, if Shopify has the same music options to be able to give people the opportunity to listen to or to download music for free. I haven't had any clients that are musicians, so I don't know if that's a capability there. But I do know that it can be a little bit more difficult to track your traffic across these 2 different platforms. But if Shopify doesn't have the option for the music, then I definitely understand why you're still using both.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Keisha, how about Keisha? Keisha's a big Etsy user.
Yes, I was very excited about like this particular day to talk about Shopify. So, originally when I started a couple of years ago, I tried Shopify, I couldn't get any traffic to it, so I canceled it and I only use Etsy. Now, my business completely died like in the last year on Etsy. So since I was getting no sales at all, it being in this class, we talked about some different avenues, and one of the things was Shopify because it integrates with products. So I did start my Shopify back up. It was still there, so that was good. But the issues that I'm having is with the integration, and I've been reading online about this. So I submitted it, I integrated it with Facebook. It only shows like 6 products, but interestingly, it says we didn't upload 6 of your products. They were like rejected, but those were actually the 6 products that shows up on Facebook. And those are not my favorite products. And because it shows up on Facebook, it's also showing up on Instagram. And so I did reach out to somebody on at Shopify to say, hey, why is this happening? And all they could tell me is to delete it, delete the integration, and then to redo it again. So I did that this week and it still didn't work. So I'm in the process of deleting it one more time to see if it will pull in the information. And I was just wondering, have you heard, because I have seen some stuff on the internet about people having similar issues, but have you dealt with any customers that have had this type of issue with Shopify with the integration with Facebook?
I have. Yeah. And it's, not that, I'm not saying Shopify is this perfect platform and they never have any mistakes, because they definitely have some things in place that I wish were different. But Facebook, because of all of the heat that they've been under, have really been tightening up their privacy and their rules and things like that. And as a result, I think that they're maybe over policing the products that are being pushed to the platform. And that results in a couple of things. One, the technical integration, like the products getting to Facebook, sometimes isn't happening. And two, sometimes products are getting rejected because the robot that polices it thinks that there's something wrong with it, when in reality it's not. So if you look at the products that aren't going through and you kind of compare it to the Facebook terms of service or the things that aren't allowed, sometimes it's a word you might have in the title or in the description that they might be misconstruing as something else. A synonym, or they just have certain keywords that mean, you can't do this, or anything political, or things that have to do with CBD, or, there's a handful of different things that kind of raise red flags for them that it might not be really obvious unless you kind of dig into it. So they also change their integrations quite a bit. It used to be that Instagram had its own login, and now you go through Facebook. And so I think as those integrations change, it can impact the way that your integration is working. Another thing that can impact it, I know I'm just kind of telling you like a lot of different things that could be wrong rather than telling you a solution, is depending on your theme. So sometimes the themes have a built-in, this is more related to the online store, but sometimes your themes work with Instagram or work with Facebook. And then if the theme doesn't update at the same time that Facebook or Instagram updates, then that can cause some issues too. But with listing your products on the Facebook sales channel, I think if you delete the integration and then add it again, check and see if any of those are being rejected and for what reason, and if it's something that you can edit and resubmit. And if it's something that you don't want on there, then you can just turn off the visibility of the Facebook sales channel. And another thing, Keisha, that I wanted to touch on is the Etsy, how Etsy just kind of fell down for you. And that, I'm sorry to hear that happened, and you're certainly not alone in that game. Etsy changed their tax status. I'm not an accountant, but there is something, or a tax attorney, or whatever those people are. Etsy, whenever they first started, they were a type of corporation, like the People First Corporation, and there's an alphanumeric term for that I don't know. So they started off as that, and then they ended up switching to just a regular type of corporation. And so now, similar to Facebook and a lot of other platforms, they are raising their fees, and they're also wanting their sellers to advertise. So if you aren't paying more money than you used to pay to advertise, then you're not showing up in listings anymore. And they've really just changed things to put more of a focus on making money for the shareholders rather than making it a platform for artists to make money. So it's an unfortunate thing, I think, for those of us who were making a living on Etsy. I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today if I hadn't started off on Etsy. But I think that you're on the right track with moving towards Shopify. One, because that's something that you can control for the most part. You get to own those customers, whereas on Etsy you don't. So I think that you're on the right track there.
Great, thank you.
All right. How about you, Quandale? I know you deal with Shopify. Any questions?
Yes. First, thanks for sharing the story. I really enjoyed it. My question is, my business is Freedom Hill brand. I use Shopify as a platform, drop shipping through Printful. My question is, what advice would you give to someone who is looking to maybe just start out on Shopify? What is that one? If you could give one piece of advice to a person that was getting started, what would it be?
For just starting a brand new business on Shopify?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much. But that's a great question. I would say to not be afraid to self-market. So one thing that Branson and that Keisha both mentioned is getting traffic to your Shopify site. So unlike Etsy and a lot of these other platforms that kind of have built-in traffic, your Shopify site is not necessarily going to have built-in traffic. And any new website is going to have a really hard time generating organic traffic just because it is brand new. And I think sometimes people have a pie in the sky mentality of, well, I'm going to just build this website and suddenly I'm going to start getting all of these orders and I'm going to be really busy. How am I going to handle it? And I always tell people, let's deal with that problem whenever we get there. And in the meantime, let's just tell people that this site exists. Mm-hmm. And with the online store, I think there's still a little bit of like a stigma around it that, we maybe aren't as confident in saying I own an e-commerce store or I sell online. And instead we want it to be this like secret thing that we don't tell anybody about until we're really wealthy. And we're not doing ourselves a service in that way. For some of us, it's really hard to self-promote. And so that would be my piece of advice is people aren't going to go to this site unless you tell them that it exists. And your first customers are probably always going to be your friends and family. And that's something with other side hustles and things that I've had, I hated that about like selling Arbonne or selling, whatever is like, you have to like ask your friends and family to host a party for you. And I just didn't want to be that person. But if your product is viable and your friends and family believe in you, then why wouldn't they, one, shop on your site and two, tell their friends and family about it? So putting it on your own social media platforms, like mentioning it to people whenever you get to meet people or they ask what you're up to, just don't be afraid to mention to people that this is your company. You're going to be your best marketer is definitely going to be yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yes.
So
this is
Go
John
ahead.
Arnold.
Hey, John.
First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. We just found it extremely interesting. You are really to be commended for what you've accomplished. We've got a gourmet food mix company, and I probably am going to need to communicate with you after this show because I've got a zillion questions for you. We've kind of got a hodgepodge as far as websites. Our original website that we have is with CityMax. We've had it for about 8 or 9 years. It gets a lot of traffic because of the length of time we've had it. We do mostly about 90% of our business is wholesale distributors. We have over 200 distributors in 41 states that we sell to. And then we do quite a bit of retail sales off of it. And we really wanted to upgrade. CityMax kind of leaves a lot to be desired. So we decided we were going to go with Google and do a WordPress website. GoDaddy, and do a WordPress website because that's what everybody told me I needed to do. And just like you said, we have found that extremely frustrating as far as really trying to come up with a really good website through WordPress. We did manage to put together a wholesale only website through that we use for our distributors. But anyway, Shopify just sounds intriguing to me. It sounds like it would maybe accomplish everything we need in one platform. So I guess my question is, would you say that yes, it would handle everything we need?
Yeah, John, without knowing, all of the details of your business, I would say yes. It can handle wholesale sales as well as retail sales. And I definitely understand your hesitation in wanting to migrate away from a site that has been serving you and that gets a lot of traffic and that is well known. And that's definitely legitimate in that new sites aren't going to get as much organic traffic as an older site. As you migrate, if you choose to migrate, Shopify does allow for you to put in URL redirects. So if someone types in a URL from your old website, it can redirect to your new website. And you also can migrate your domain so that when someone types in your homepage, your web address, it's going to go to the new site instead. With that hesitation that comes with, well, I've had this site for so long, I don't want to switch. I would encourage you to consider, if you don't switch now, is there going to be a better time? After you've had a site for 8 or 9 years and you're like, well, this one's working, why change it? In 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, then that amount of time is just going to be, multiplied, and it's going to be even harder to migrate away from. So in that regard, there's no better time than the present to make this change. And because you have such a strong wholesale following, you will be able to reach out to those wholesale customers and let them know that your site is getting a refresh and that your domain is going to be the same. And you can also give them instruction there about how they can order on the new site. You can migrate your customer list from your old site to your new site and send them account invitations so they can reorder there. So Shopify has a lot of features. I'm not familiar with the platform that you're on right now, but I do know that that Shopify has a lot of great options for people who wholesale. If you want to start a subscription-based business where people have recurring orders, then that's a great option for you. And WordPress, it just requires a lot more technical skill. I mean, there are really beautiful, amazing, highly customized sites on WordPress, but those are people who know exactly what they're doing. Whereas Shopify is something that, if you have the desire to learn how to do it, it doesn't require a lot of technical skill, which makes it a lot easier to manage. So yeah, I would recommend looking into it. And knowing that it might be painful for a little bit, but I think you're going to be really pleased with the final result.
That sounds great. I really appreciate that. I think it really sounds like it would be a smart move for us, really.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'll put Tessa's contact information. Make sure you have it, John.
That sounds great, Dennis. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else want to jump in? Kime or Ruth? Ruth is looking at Shopify, if I'm not mistaken.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm listening to you guys while I'm in production today. So apologies. Thanks for a great presentation. And I do have a question in that, is there a particular demographic who tend to use Shopify? So distributors, end customers, do you see who uses it most, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for your customers, on the customer end of things, people don't necessarily know that they're on a Shopify site when they're on it. If you build Shopify sites, if you're really familiar with it, then you can recognize certain things in the cart or in the footer or in the order email confirmations. Then you'll be able to recognize that it's a Shopify site, but it doesn't necessarily make a difference for your customer, because they're just going to go to your domain, like mrsruthsjams.com or whatever that might be. Right. And in terms of the sellers who are selling on it, it's a huge spectrum. Sometimes people who have been in business for a while find themselves with the same website, the same platform that they've had for a while, because they probably spent a lot of money and time building it. And there's the, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it type of mentality. I spent X amount of thousands of dollars on this, this many years ago. I don't want to go through all of that again. So sometimes that happens, that people who have been in business for a while, regardless of their age, aren't on there. But there are people who have, smaller businesses like that just sell at like a farmer's market once a week, all the way up to like giant, massive, multi-billion-dollar e-commerce companies are on Shopify. Like Kylie Jenner's cosmetics runs on Shopify. I think Drake the musician, I think his merchandise is on Shopify. Like it's pretty broad in that regard. And it's both user friendly and highly powerful, which is a nice combination.
Yeah, certainly so. So do you have, then it sounds like you have the capabilities to have multiple, I don't know, interfaces or logons or whatever, depending on the kind of customer that it is?
Yeah. So I believe you're referencing what Shopify calls sales channels. So you can sell on your point of sale. So if you have a retail store, or if you sell at pop-ups or markets or fairs, and then you also can have the online sales channel as well. And as Keisha was talking about, you can have the Facebook and Instagram sales channels. It also integrates with Amazon, with Walmart has a marketplace that integrates with it. There are dozens really of sales channels that you can be on while only listing your product one time, which is a huge upgrade from a few years ago, when if you wanted to expand and sell on different platforms or different sales channels, you had to list all of those products again and upload all those photos and fill them all in. And it was a deal breaker, really. It was really prohibitive to moving on to different sales channels. And now with Shopify, you list it once. And if you want to push this same product to your website, then you just make it available on your online store. It also, that capability is nice for people who have a retail store or work with customers face to face and having it online. Because if you don't have time to take photos and write a description, you can still sell it face to face just without having it visible on your sales channels. Is that where sales channels, what you were referring to?
Sort of, but that's very helpful. And I think actually, in a way, I think it is. What I meant was, like, if you're selling wholesale, you can give them one access, different price lists, different details, whatever. Or if it's in customer, then you have a different way in, but you're listing your product one time. And I think you said yes.
Yes, you can also use it for your wholesale customers. And there are a variety of different ways that you can execute that. The way that I use is through an app. So when the customer goes to my website, they log on, and on my back end, I have designated when they applied for a wholesale license through me or a wholesale account, I just added a tag in the little field below their name that says wholesale. And then in my app, I say, if a customer is logged in and their tag is wholesale, then give them this % off with this minimum order.
Cool.
And then whenever they log in, they see the retail price marked out, and then they see their order. And if you have a minimum order requirement, then that also can be executed within that.
Cool. That's great. Now, one last question. A lot of my friends who are food vendors or food entrepreneurs use a platform called Fair. And I don't know if it's food specific. Are you familiar with it? And if so, how does it compare with Shopify?
Yes, great question. So fair.com, FAIRE.com is it's a wholesale marketplace. So as a owner of a retail store, I use Fair quite a bit, and I shop for products to carry in my store. So it's not food specific. There's clothing, there's jewelry, there's dog collars, anything you can think of, gardening supplies, basically every category under the sun is sold there. And so Fair is, I would put it more similar to Etsy than to Shopify, only in that Fair is going to bring its own customers with it. So there are people who maybe aren't customers of yours yet, but who do shop on fair.com. So you can use, my recommendation for you without knowing your situation would probably be to have your retail website with a wholesale logon through Fair or through Shopify, and then also list your products on fair.com. So fair.com is going to open you up to more people who are shopping on Fair, but as most, sales reps, it's kind of like an online sales reps, they do take a significant percentage of your order. Now, I think they have it set up so that if they go to your site directly, fair.com/Mrs. Ruth Jams, then you don't pay as much of a percentage as if they go to fair.com and they find you by navigating to your page through searching for food products, for example. So I think it would be a great way to get new customers. But then after that, you might want to have those same customers reorder through you so that you can make a higher margin on those sales.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for the question.
All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time together. Tess, we can't thank you enough for your fascinating presentation and your willingness to so openly discuss your trials and tribulations and successes. And what I'm going to do is make sure your contact information is available to anybody here who would like to talk to you about Shopify, or who knows, maybe they want to talk about going to UNC Wilmington, who knows. But at any rate, thank you very, very much for coming to our class today, and we really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dennis, for having me, and thank you to everyone else for tuning in, for having me, and for asking some great questions. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you all soon.